What's up guys? Today we are making Tonkotsu soup stock. Now, usually when I made ramen during the quarantine and I was selling to people and slinging it left and right and people were loving it and telling me it was so good, that was a double soup ramen inspired by Chef Ivan Orkin's recipe, hence part of why we made those noodles in the last video. But Tonkotsu is that ramen that just like, it's the ramen you dream about, or at least it's the ramen I dream about. It just has that thick, in-your-face pork flavors. It gives you soup belly, it feels warm, it feels like home. It's amazing. And if you remember way back, like 2 weeks ago, when I talked about making tonkatsu, that is fried pork cutlet. In tonkotsu is soup stock. And so if you ever see a restaurant that's talking about ramen and they say tonkatsu ramen, just don't go there. They don't even know the difference in their soup stock. Or at least they're catering to an audience that thinks they know, like a lot of Americans think that it's tonkatsu, not tonkotsu. It's tonkotsu, and that's what we're here to make today. Now tonkotsu is scary for the home cook because it's minimum 12 hours. Upwards of a lot of real ramen shops in Japan will cook their pork bones for a day, 2 days, 3 days, which is crazy. You could also make this in a pressure cooker. I will only judge you a little bit if you choose to do that, but this video is going to be talking about how you do it here at home on the stovetop for a minimum of 12 hours. You're going to get a good mix of pork flavors. We're going to add in a tiny bit of aromatics at the end, as well as some stuff to get some additional umami in the broth. And then a little bit of a sneak peek preview of what a bowl looks like, all assembled and ready to go, which we will do after we've covered every component of making this homemade tonkotsu ramen bowl. So let's get into it. So I had a mix of neck bones and femur bones, as well as some pig trotters. And I find that a good mix of bones from across the pig is really important. You want a solid mix of collagen and fat. It's a really, actually pretty delicate balance to get a beautiful tonkotsu stock, and I find that the combination of bones is a great way to get that. You could also add some fat back from a pork belly, which I think would go a long way. Then you're just going to add enough water to a large stock pot to cover, and then bring that over to your stove and get that to a rolling boil. This next portion is crucial here. We're going to remove what they call the scum from the initial broth. So once that's at a rolling boil, you're going to take a fine mesh sieve, and you see all that, scum's a great word. You're going to see that scum rise to the top. I find that if you let it coagulate for about 10 to 15 minutes while it's boiling, it's easier to remove. Then you're just going to take that sieve and remove all of the scum. And it's crucial that you're as thorough as possible here so that you render out a very light, bright stock that doesn't have any of these impurities. After about 30 minutes of this initial boil, you're actually going to dump all of that water out into the sink or wherever and save the pork bones. And realize that this is not a great method of doing that. So once you're done dumping these out, you're going to swap that for your Dutch oven and catch all of the pork bones inside of the bowl. Once you've got those all transferred over, the next step here is going to make sure to just really thoroughly clean out your stock pot. So I just gave this a quick wipe down with some paper towel and some water. Again, you can see some of that scum left over in the pot, and you want that to be completely removed so that, again, we have a really, really clear stock, or rather, you know, tonkotsu is not clear, but it will be nothing but pure pork flavor. Then you're going to give all of your bones a quick rinse under some cool water, and just make sure that you remove any, like, you know, remaining scum, dirt, whatever. Cringe a little bit on the inside when you realize you're handling a pork's foot. And then once you have those thoroughly rinsed, you're going to add those back into your stock pot and fill them back up with just enough water to cover. And then after you've got enough water to cover, you're going to reuse the same footage that you used earlier for transferring that back over to the oven so that you can get this back to a boil. And this is when the real cooking time starts. So from about 12 hours from this point, or rather from the first boil point, the second go around, is when you're going to actually start your cooking time, and you need at least 12 hours, ideally 16 to 18. I had a tiny bit of scum come back to the top after this return to the boil, so I just made sure I skimmed all of that out. And then what follows for the next 12 hours is really just a combination of covering the pot and checking to see how your broth is looking. You can see now it's still very thin. This is after only a couple hours. And re-adding water and bringing that back to a boil and recovering it. And you can see as we return every time, that the stock really starts to change. And the key of a good Tonkotsu stock is what they refer to as this kind of milky color. And what that is the emulsification of all of the fats and collagen from the pig getting emulsified in the broth from the rolling boil. Now the boil is crucial. You must keep this at a rolling boil for the entirety of the cook time, no exceptions. And you can see by the end of this process here, we have that milk color starting to come through. And with about an hour and a half to 2 hours left of cook time, I like to add my aromatics. So for me, that's 2 carrots peeled. And then once I peel the carrots, I also added I would say it was about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch knob of ginger. Be very careful with the ginger. That is something that can very quickly overwhelm the stock. And just a pro tip for peeling ginger, if you use just a soup spoon, really easy to get into all the nooks and crannies of a ginger root to get that peeled. Once you have your carrots and your ginger peeled, I chopped 2 heads of garlic in half so to expose all of the cloves. I ended up actually only using 1.5 cloves. I think 2 probably would have been fine. And after the garlic is chopped up, then I went and grabbed a shallot. Apparently, according to Mr. Weissman, there is a shortage of shallots in certain areas of the country right now, Houston in particular. So if you can't find a shallot, a yellow onion's fine, but a shallot really is a better flavor. Remove the roots and just chop that in half again so that you're exposing all of the shallot. And then I took a bunch of green onions as well. And in this case, both literally and figuratively, a bunch of green onions. And just chop those up. A rough chop really doesn't matter. You're just adding these to the stock. And once you have all of your aromatics cut and prepped, I just went and dumped them into the stock pot. And again, you're only gonna let these be in there for about 1.5, maybe 2 hours. You don't wanna add the aromatics early on in the cook process for 2 reasons. One, the longer they boil, the sugars inside of the aromatics will actually start to caramelize, and you'll see that the stock starts to take on a different color than that milky hue. And we wanna minimize that. This is a really key element of a great Tonkotsu stock. And then the second reason for adding the aromatics too early is they actually lose their aromatic properties. So it kind of defeats the purpose. And what I didn't capture is I actually added about 1/2 pack of dried porcini mushrooms to really just amp up that umami flavor in the broth. And what you have at the end of 12 hours is a beautiful milky Tonkotsu broth full of aromatics and umami. And man, I really should get a new strainer, because if you've watched any of my videos, you know that this is a recurring trend of dumping that everywhere. So you're going to strain out that broth, and once you have everything strained out, I like to store this in mason jars or soup containers, whatever works. You'll notice here that when you let this sit, it starts to develop just a tiny bit of a skin. You can see that when you pull it down. It really doesn't matter. It instantly dissolves. The way I like to do this, it's probably not effective or efficient, but it's what I do. I just dunk my mason jars in there, realize that I had a funnel laying about, and just transfer all of that into containers. Now, if you're gonna freeze this, which I am, be very careful not to overfill. And just a sneak preview for the future, we're gonna do a little bowl assembly here. So you can see with the aromatic oil and the tare, with the soup getting poured over, and my mouth is watering watching this again. There is the noodles from our earlier toasted rye noodle recipe. Just give them a quick fold over, and then start adding your toppings. So we have our chashu, which the video is coming for that very soon. And the final additions after the chashu are some sheets of nori and some menma. I also usually would add a tamago, which is just a soy marinated egg, which I didn't have prepped in time for this bowl. But we will do a full breakdown on preparing that bowl of ramen in a future video. And that's it. Peace, y'all. Till next time.